You are here because you are not happy with where you are and you want to go to a place that is better, a place that you desire, a place where you feel free, happy, and you're not sure what steps you need to take in order to get there. So, today I'm going to talk about the first step that everybody needs to take in order to move the needle towards the life that they desire or the goal that they desire to have. So, the first thing that you need to do is you have to truly, truly, truly be unhappy with where you are. And when I say truly, truly unhappy, I mean that a lot of times people are stuck in their ways. Okay, people have certain habits that they get used to, and even though the habits are painful, they continue to cultivate those habits even though they could be detrimental for to them, right? And you have to, in a way, have some level of like being at like rock bottom to make a change, right? So there's this example of a frog that is put in a like a pot, and they put the frog in water and they put hot water in it, and the frog immediately jumps out, right? So it's like a really quick reaction, and they're like, oh, this is danger, I'm out of there. But then they did the experiment where they put the frog in cool water, and then they were slowly heating up the water, and the frog didn't move. Even though it got warm, it didn't create any sense of urgency for the frog, and it just stayed there and stayed there, and it just kept getting hotter and hotter, and the frog's body just kept adjusting and adjusting until eventually the frog was not able to escape once it got to the point where it couldn't bear it anymore. And so that is what most people do, okay, in terms of their habits, in terms of the situations that they're in that they're not happy with. They don't end up having a strong enough reason to get them out of the situation before the situation becomes toxic or even life threatening, right? And so part of that is just the fact that most people are not able to love themselves, right? Most people do not have an internal liking of who they are, and most people believe what has been told of them. So if they were a child, then they looked for their sense of identity from their parents, and then they looked for it from peers, from teachers, from superiors. So a lot of people's sense of identity comes from people outside of themselves, and a lot of times people don't take the time to cultivate the self, their inner self, right? And so they have a hard time really knowing who they are. And what they find is when they look at who they are, they realize that they don't like who they see, because who they see is a combination of all the different people outside of themselves that have kind of they've borrowed their identity from, right? And so there's always that inner knowing, there's always that inner sense in you that tells you that, hey, the thing that you're doing is not the right thing because it feels uncomfortable. If you do something, if you're living a life and you're completely happy and whatever, then you probably won't want to make like a major change. But if you feel like it's just not who you are and you're not comfortable, it's because you have adopted things that are not in alignment with who you are. And so you need to then get to the point where you're like, you know what? I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be free. I deserve to figure out who I am. I want to take away all the things that have been placed on me, all the identities, all the perceptions, all the judgment, all the responsibility or expectations that have been placed on me. I need to take all of those things out, and I need to create something new, right? And that's the journey that we're all on. It's the journey of creating something new for ourselves, because we're currently in a place, we've recognized that we're in a place where what we're doing is not in alignment with who we are or who we want to be. And so you need to really make sure that you are not happy with who you are, and you are not happy with what your life looks like, and you want to make a change. Because some people, like I said, they see all the things, but because there's something about their life that is comfortable, they stay in the pot, and the life continues to burn the fire underneath them, and they never move, right? And so you have to stay away from comfort, and a lot of times that's where people end up in trouble, right? They find comfort in different things like food. They find comfort in shopping. They find comfort in scrolling on social media. They find comfort in worrying about everything outside of themselves, right? Because in a way, looking inwards, looking within, assessing yourself, and honestly growing is painful. Like, the process of growth is painful, and people don't want to grow. People want to stay in a comfortable situation, even if they know that it is not the best situation. If there's one component of it that's comfortable, or if there's something that they can use to find comfort while they stay in a situation that's continuously putting fire under their butt, then they will stay there. And so you have to be at a place where you're like, I'm going to yank the comfort out, right? I'm going to forego all the comforts so I can build something new. And that is almost a shock to the system. And that is usually what it takes for somebody to make a change. And sometimes you can be the one who creates that shock for yourself. And other times, I will say, if you believe in God or source or whatever is going to create that shock for you. Either way, the shock has to be the shock has to be there to make you jump out of the comfortable situation and seek a better situation. So first step is, honestly, you need a shock. There has to be a shock that takes you from your comfortable but that takes you from a place where you're comfortable but slowly dying, and shocks you out so that you can find your footing in the unknown, which I'll talk about the next thing that you need to do. Okay. And then the next thing is, once you really decide that, okay, you know what, either I've decided that I'm going to create this shock in my system and create a very drastic change, right? Then the next thing that you need to do is you need to really be honest about where you are, and the things that you're upset about or you feel are not good about your life. You want to be honest about the role that you played in that situation that's not comfortable. So I'll give you an example. So a few years ago, I went through a breakup, and the breakup or the situation was not a good situation. Most people could tell that it was not a good situation, right? And so I had people who saw the situation and they knew it wasn't good, but I had to be the one to take myself out of that situation. And so once I finally took myself out of the situation, because I wasn't going to wait for something else to cause that, that exit, I decided to initiate the exit myself. When I did that, the next thing that I had to do was I had to sit down and assess everything that happened in the relationship, assess all the bad things that happened, all the things I was not happy about, every single thing about it. I had to look at it and ask myself, what role did I play in the situation? Because the thing that most people do is they want to blame other people for the thing that happened. And I'm not saying that other people cannot be at fault. A lot of times, a lot of people are at fault for either hurting you or causing you to be in pain, right? And that's why you have to leave. But I think that everything is like a coin, right? There's always two sides to the story. And again, You have to assess the side that is the inside, the inner side, the you side, because you have no control over the outside, what the people on the outside did. You don't know what their motivations were. You don't know their intentions. You don't know any of that stuff. But you can look at your stuff and your contribution to it and ask yourself, what did I do? What role did I play, right? Did I get into this relationship because, I'll give you an example. So I got into this relationship because I was like, I'm in the right place in my career. I'm 30. This is the next step, right? I should get into, and this person seemed like the right person, so I should get into this relationship because I only have a few years to have kids. So that was like my thinking, right? So I had to sit down and think to myself, okay, was that the right assessment for me, right? Did I make that decision because other people were saying things that made me feel like that was the right thing, right? And that was partially that. And so I had to take responsibility for putting myself in a situation that was not great for me, but at the time I thought was the right decision because of how I grew up, what was expected, what people told me to do, and realizing that at that point I never actually had asked myself, my true self, my inner self, what I was looking for in a relationship, because I just never had that training. I spent most of my life pursuing medicine, and I never really explored relationships and all of that. So that was new territory for me, and I went in extremely naive, and then I ended up in a not so great situation. So I had to work through all this stuff, because at first I was very angry. I was angry about everything. I was angry about the person. I was angry about the people who told me to do this, and everybody said, well, ultimately you had to make the decision. You're the one who married this person. So I had to sit down and really assess everything, the decisions that I made, why I made the decisions, what emotions were driving the decisions that I made. And then I had to be honest about it, and be honest and say, there's some things that I did because of what other people said. There's some things that I did because of what society was expecting me, or the pressure to be a certain way at a certain age, right? And so there were a lot of outside influences, and I realized that I was the type of person who did things for other people more than I did for myself. That was an assessment. That was a conclusion that I came to once I sat down and asked myself, what role did I play? And so I realized that basically I was a people pleaser. I did things that everybody outside of myself said was the right thing to do, but I never took the time to ask myself if this was the right thing to do. And there were times when, like, I noticed red flags and all of that, and I didn't trust my intuition. And that was also another thing that I had to accept, that even though I had a nudge not to do this thing, I let everything outside of myself quiet my inner knowing, right? And I had to forgive myself for all of that. So you really need to be honest with yourself about the role that you play, right? What have you done in this that has contributed to you being in this situation that you are absolutely sick and tired of and you're ready to get out of, right? So be honest about it. It's not an easy process. I would encourage you to even work with someone like a therapist or a counselor to help you work through it, because doing it alone is possible, but it just takes a lot longer versus doing it with a counselor or a therapist or even a friend who is objective enough and can help you work through the role that you played, help you be honest with yourself about what role you played, because then it helps you to diagnose, like, okay, I realized what my problem was and why I either attracted or tolerated this bad situation, right? And you need to know it because you don't want to make the same mistake in the future. If you don't take the time to make this assessment, you end up repeating the cycle. That's how cycles get repeated. I remember talking to someone and they were like, I feel like I'm dating the same person even though they're like different people, but they feel like the same person. And I was like, there's probably something about you that you haven't looked at. There's something about you that you haven't assessed, and because you haven't assessed it, you haven't noticed that you're repeating a pattern. And until you take a break and look at it and heal from it and forgive yourself for whatever role that you played or what other people played, you won't be able to break that circle that you're in, that loop that you're in, right? So the self-assessment part is so important. Yes, it can be difficult. Yes, it can be painful. It is so much easier to blame other people for the things that are happening in your life. It's so easy to look outwards for the problem, but you have to start inwards. It's like it has to start from the inside, and then you can move outwards, okay? So that's the second thing that you need to do, is be honest with the role that you played and forgive yourself for the role that you played, because you didn't know, right? It's one of like, forgive me for I didn't know what I was doing type of thing, right? You didn't know. And you finally got sick enough that you decided to ask, to inquire why you did these things. And then once you find out what it is, you forgive yourself for it, okay? And then the third step is, and this is all part of one step, but the third thing you need to do is you need to be grateful. And I think that's going to be the thumbnail, is making sure that you are grateful for where you are. Be grateful for the experiences and the lessons that you have learned throughout the process. And then be grateful for where you're going, okay? So be grateful for where you are now. It has to be very simple and basic, right? A lot of times when you're in a painful situation, it's really difficult to see what you can be grateful for. And one of the things that I tell people to do is, if you're watching this video right now, then you have air in your lungs, you have your sight, you have your hearing, you have a phone or a device that allows you to see and go through this energy exchange, which probably means that you have electricity, which means you have a house, which means you probably have food. You really need to go to the most basic of things and be grateful for it. I went to an amusement park with my daughter over the weekend, and she saw a teenager who was blind and had no eyes. And she had these questions. She was like, so how is she navigating like her world, because she can't see? And I was like, I don't think that she thinks about that, because she's never been able to see. She didn't, like, it's not like she lost her sight where she had it and then she lost it. She was born without eyes. And so I was like, she probably doesn't think about that. She probably is just grateful that she gets to experience some form of life. She's breathing. She had people there who were willing to help her. She was able to come to an amusement park and listen to our show that we were sitting at, right? And so she's still able to experience the things that people experience without, worrying about what's missing or what's bad or whatever. And I think that was such a helpful example for my daughter, because she was just like, well, I'm so grateful that I have eyes. And just that one statement really shifted her mood away from all the things that she was worried about, to like what 8-year-olds are worried about in terms of like school and outfits and all of that. But she was just like, wow, I never really thought about how important my eyes are and the fact that I can see. And so she was like, I'm really grateful that I have eyes. And one of the things I love about being grateful is that it produces a sense of happiness within you that is able to really counteract the negativity, right? Negative thoughts, negative situations, traumas are so heavy on a person's body, on a person's mind or psyche. But when you start to look away from it and you start looking for reasons to be grateful, it's almost like being grateful creates like a frequency, a light frequency that like breaks the darkness. I don't know if I'm making that up, but that's how it feels for me. It's like being grateful and being happy in your body creates that frequency where you can, it creates a light within you, right? And within your mind. And when you have a light, then you can navigate the dark, right? And so being grateful, I think, is the best thing that you can do, because once you get to that point and you're able to now use that light, that gratefulness, to navigate the dark path, you're able to move forward. It's harder to move forward when it's completely dark and there's no lights, right? Because you're just like, which direction do I go in? Everything is dark. That's the negativity. That's the tough side that you're in. That's the struggle that you're in. So you need to take the steps, like first accepting that you're in the dark because you're in a bad situation, and accepting the role that you played in terms of becoming, accepting the role that you played in the darkness that you're in, right? In the darkness that's in your life, in the heaviness that's in your life. Because all you can do is focus on the things that you can control. And I think if you do those two things and then you start focusing on being grateful for the air that you breathe, the food that you eat, the fact that you have all of your sight, the fact that you have a place to stay, the fact that you have a healthy body, the fact that you have family, whatever it is, right? Even if you don't have family, the fact that you just get to have an experience today, because all you have is one day, right? You're living one day at a time and you're doing your best to experience this day to the fullest. If you can really be grateful for the 24 hours, the 8 hours of sleep that you got, the 16 hours of life that you get to experience, if you can be grateful for it, it is going to create, or I will say it is going to flame the inner light that is in you so it can shine bright. And that light is what's going to guide you towards where you want to be. So when it comes to being grateful, start being grateful with what's in the body. Be grateful with what's in your environment. Be grateful for the lessons that you have learned about yourself throughout this journey, because you will need those lessons, not just for you, but maybe for a future generation, for like your kids or for a friend, right? We all go through situations, and when we get out of them, our job, I think, is to teach people. You don't have to go and formally teach them, but when you are able to solve a problem or get out of a dark situation, you start to have a light about you, and it helps people say, hey, if she can get through this dark situation, then maybe I can get through it. You don't necessarily have to teach them, but the light that you emit, because you've gotten through the darkness and gotten to the side of the light, helps other people light the way for themselves, right? It helps to trigger that light or reawaken the light in those people so that they can take those steps. So step one is you really need to make sure that you shock your body. Either you do the shocking, or sometimes the system or the world will shock you, or God will shock you, right? Take away a job. Really bad situations happen that shock you. And then once you are shocked and you are stepping out of it, you really need to take the time in between to be honest about the role that you played in the whole thing, because that's the only side of the coin that you have control over. It's looking at what role did you play, because you cannot control what other people did to you. You cannot control why they did it. And one of the things, speaking of divorce, one of the things that I had to learn was at some point I wanted closure about a situation, and I got to the point where like I felt like the seeking the closure was stopping me from going to the next step, right? And so I had to just let go of that, because that was not something that was under my control. The only thing that I could control was me and how I saw the situation and how grateful I was that I was not in that situation anymore. And whatever they did for whatever intention was not my business. I had no control over it. And I didn't want to continue the pattern of needing people outside of me to control how I did things, how I felt, how I navigated my life. So you have to really, this is like the biggest part, you really have to work hard to take the time to make an assessment of what role you played in the situation, and then move on to the next thing. So for today's example, my example was my people-pleasing tendencies. But sometimes for some people, it could be a self-worth issue. Like you take a job that is not paying you well, and then you're not being treated well, and you're asking yourself, well, why am I doing this job if I'm not getting the pay that I want, right? Like, what can I do different? So it doesn't matter what it is. Different people have different different ways that they betray themselves, right? And so you have to figure out which one is yours, either by doing a lot of research, reading, getting a therapist, all of that, and working through that so you can get to the point where you can now have a light within your life, and you can be grateful for your body and the life that you have. You can be grateful for the lessons that you have learned, and you can use that gratefulness to propel you forward. Because like I said, if there's no light in your body, you can't see, and if you can't see, you can't move forward. So take the steps necessary to create the light that is needed for you to see, so you can go on the path and you can take the next step forward. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, let me know below, and I will see you in another video.